The Grelk had never been this cold in their entire lives. As they led the human delegation into their ice-covered outpost, their shivers were obvious. Zarvok, the Grelk leader, looked over at Captain Sarah Jensen, the human in charge of this diplomatic mission, hoping she was just as miserable as he was. But, to his confusion, Jensen appeared unbothered, smiling through the brisk air as though the freezing temperatures were mere inconvenience. "Isn't it a bit chilly for your kind?" Zarvok asked cautiously, tightening his thermal cloak. His teeth chattered slightly, betraying his discomfort. Jensen glanced at him and shrugged, blowing into her hands. "Nah, not too bad. Kind of like a brisk morning back home. Though I will admit, it's colder than I expected." The other Grelk officials exchanged looks, clearly baffled. The temperature had been steadily dropping, nearing lethal levels for most species. The icy moon was infamous for its harsh conditions, and even the Grelk, who thrived in temperate climates, found survival here a constant battle. Zarvok had specifically warned the humans about the dangers of the freezing temperatures, hoping they'd understand the gravity of their situation. Yet, here were the Deathworlders, acting like it was nothing more than a frosty walk in the park. The humans moved around the outpost with ease. Jensen's team was chatting casually as they unpacked their equipment, laughing about previous missions. One of them even had the audacity to joke about how this moon's cold wasn't as bad as some Earth winters. Zarvok's brow furrowed. How could anyone be so dismissive of this icy wasteland? As the humans settled in for diplomatic talks, the Grelk remained wrapped in layers of thermal wear, huddling closer to the heating vents. The contrast was jarring. The Grelk delegation had anticipated more formality, perhaps even a mutual agreement on how hostile the environment was. Instead, they were met with humans who seemed indifferent to what Zarvok considered a deadly cold. "Tell me, Captain Jensen," Zarvok began, his voice shaky from the cold, "how do your people handle environments like this? Surely you must have some advanced technologies." Jensen smiled, sipping a steaming cup of something the Grelk couldn't identify. "Oh, we've been through worse. Antarctica back home makes this place look like a vacation spot. We got a few tricks up our sleeves, but mostly it's about staying calm and using common sense." Zarvok blinked, unsure if she was being serious or trying to ease his discomfort. Before he could ask another question, alarms blared throughout the outpost. Red lights flashed as a loud warning voice declared, "Heating system failure." Emergency protocols initiated. The panic among the Grelk was immediate. Several members of the delegation jumped to their feet, scrambling to check the status of the heaters. Zevnak, the head Grelk engineer, rushed to a console, his claws flying over the controls in a frantic attempt to get the system back online. Jensen raised an eyebrow and looked at her team. "Well, this is going to be interesting." While the Grelk were in full crisis mode, the humans didn't even flinch. Jensen calmly instructed her team to gather their emergency gear, handing out extra layers of clothing and pulling out thermal blankets. The Grelk watched, bewildered, as the humans began preparing for what was clearly a life-threatening situation with an almost casual efficiency. Zarvok was stunned. "Do you not understand the severity of this? If the heat isn't restored soon, we will all freeze to death." Jensen nodded as she wrapped a scarf around her neck. "Yeah, we get it. But we've been through worse. We'll be fine." Her calm demeanor didn't ease Zarvok's rising anxiety. He looked around at his shivering colleagues, then back at the humans, who seemed completely in control. How could they be so calm in the face of what he considered certain death? Zevnak frantically worked on the heater's control system, muttering to himself as he tried to fix the malfunction. The Grelk were visibly struggling. One by one, they gathered in the warmest corner of the room, desperately trying to conserve body heat. Yet the humans continued as though nothing was wrong. A few even chuckled as they adjusted their clothing, cracking jokes about the cold. One of the humans, a man named Liam, grinned as he handed a thermal jacket to another team member. "Remember that time we got stuck in Siberia for a week? Now that was cold. This is just a mild inconvenience." Zarvok's eyes widened. Mild inconvenience. How could they treat this like some minor annoyance? His hands trembled, both from the cold and disbelief, as he watched these Deathworlders operate as though they had everything under control. Could they truly be so unaffected by conditions that would kill most species within hours? Zevnak cursed under his breath as sparks flew from the control panel. The heating system wasn't coming back anytime soon, and the temperature was dropping fast. The Grelk were in trouble, and they knew it. Zevnak's hands were shaking as he continued to work on the heating controls, but not from the cold alone. Panic was setting in. The system was in worse shape than he'd thought, and the repairs were going to take far longer than anticipated. Every passing minute brought the temperature lower, and the Grelk, already sensitive to the cold, were nearing their breaking point. Meanwhile, the humans had already adjusted to the situation. Jensen, keeping an eye on her team, noticed the growing distress among the Grelk, but didn't rush to offer any comfort just yet. She was curious to see how long they'd last before asking for help. Liam sat nearby, casually tightening his boots, his breath visible in the frigid air. The humans knew they were prepared. Their gear, emergency supplies, and instincts had already kicked in, honed through countless years of surviving harsher environments on Earth. Captain Jensen had assessed the situation immediately after the heating system failure. They weren't in immediate danger, not like the Grelk. They'd faced sub-zero conditions before, on expeditions in the Antarctic or deep in Siberia. To them, it was all just another challenge. For the Grelk, though, this was near the edge of life and death. Zarvok, wrapped tightly in his thermal cloak, eyed the humans with growing disbelief. It wasn't just that they weren't panicking, they seemed almost indifferent. How could they not be shivering? How could they remain so composed? His teeth chattered as he approached Jensen, his eyes wide with anxiety. "We were going to freeze if this isn't fixed soon. Can't your people do something?" His voice was tight, a mix of fear and frustration. Jensen sipped from a thermos and raised an eyebrow. "We're doing what we can," she said, gesturing to her team who were now setting up portable heat shelters. "You might want to join us. It's going to get colder before it gets better." Zarvok's eyes flicked to the makeshift shelters the humans were setting up. They weren't panicking. They weren't running for the ships. Instead, they were simply adapting. The shelters were basic but effective, layers of blankets, thermal materials, and body heat. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The Grelk hadn't even thought to try such a low-tech solution. To them, survival had always been about high-tech systems, heating panels, climate controls, and automated emergency procedures. Their lives were so reliant on technology that without it, they were almost helpless in such hostile conditions. Now, watching the humans, Zarvok realized just how differently their species approached survival. One of Jensen's team, a woman named Claire, was heating up a portable ration pack, steam rising from it. She tossed one to Zarvok, who fumbled it in his cold hands. "Eat something warm," she said with a casual smile. "It'll help your body keep its core temperature up. You can't survive the cold on an empty stomach." Zarvok stared at the ration pack. It was such a simple, practical solution, yet it hadn't occurred to him. The Grelk, already feeling the effects of the cold, had been so focused on repairing the systems that they hadn't thought about maintaining their body heat in other ways. He took a hesitant bite of the food and immediately felt a surge of warmth through his body. Meanwhile, Liam was busy gathering materials from around the outpost, anything that could help insulate against the cold. He piled up crates, using them to block drafts, and cover the gaps with tarps and spare blankets. Zevnak, still working on the heater, paused for a moment to watch. "You're not concerned about freezing?" Zevnak asked, his voice barely audible above the hum of failing equipment. Liam glanced over, shaking his head with a grin. "Not really. It's not the first time we've dealt with cold like this. You'd be surprised what a bit of insulation and movement can do. Exercise helps too, keeps the blood flowing." He gave Zevnak a reassuring pat on the shoulder before continuing his work. Zevnak looked at the humans again, his mind struggling to comprehend their behavior. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in this environment. While the Grelk were huddled, shivering, and paralyzed by the cold, the humans were actively improving their situation. How could two species be so different? As the hours passed, the Grelk grew weaker, the cold gnawing at their bodies. Their technology had failed them, and they were starting to lose hope. Zevnak's hands were numb. barely able to work the controls any longer. Zarvok could see it in his people's eyes, the creeping despair, the knowledge that they might not make it. But then, almost as if sensing the breaking point, Jensen stood up, her voice steady and firm. "All right, everyone, let's get them warmed up." Her team sprang into action. They didn't wait for the Grelk to ask for help. They shared their blankets, their food, and their body heat. The Grelk, initially reluctant, soon realized they had no other choice. Huddled together with the humans in the makeshift shelters, they began to feel warmth creeping back into their limbs. Liam led a brief exercise session, showing the Grelk how to keep their bodies moving to generate heat. It was awkward at first. Zarvok found himself stumbling over the strange human movements, but soon enough, they were all following along. It wasn't dignified, but it was effective. Zevnak, too tired to protest, finally allowed the humans to wrap him in layers of blankets. The warmth was immediate, and for the first time since the heating failure, he felt like he might survive. The humans weren't just surviving, they were teaching the Grelk how to survive. Zarvok realized then that this was what made Deathworlders so unique. It wasn't just their physical resilience, it was their adaptability, their ability to take control of any situation and find solutions, no matter how dire. They didn't rely on technology alone. They relied on their instincts, their teamwork, and their unshakable confidence. And through it all, the humans remained calm. They joked, they laughed, and they reassured the Grelk. To them, this really was just a mild inconvenience, a bump in the road, nothing more. Zarvok, still shivering but no longer in panic, couldn't help but feel a newfound respect for the humans. They had faced down a situation that would have killed his people and treated it as little more than an inconvenience. The Grelk had come into this thinking they were equals in this galaxy. Now, Zarvok wasn't so sure. The humans had shown them something far more valuable than any trade agreement or diplomatic pact. They had shown them how to survive. The cold had intensified to the point where every breath the Grelk took seemed to scrape their lungs like shards of ice. Zarvok, though wrapped in every layer he could find, felt his fingers and toes go numb. The Grelk were huddled together, shaking uncontrollably, their bodies unable to generate enough heat to combat the freezing temperatures. It was clear that the Grelk's physiology was ill-equipped for this kind of extreme environment. Yet, as he looked at the humans, the contrast could not have been starker. They were still moving around with ease, checking on their portable heaters, sipping hot drinks, and talking among themselves. They were smiling, even laughing at times. It was as if they were at some kind of social gathering rather than stuck in a deadly freeze. Zarvok's mind struggled to process what he was witnessing. How could they be so unaffected? Jensen's voice broke through his thoughts. "You all holding up all right?" she asked, walking over with her hands tucked into her jacket pockets. The calmness in her tone made it clear she wasn't particularly concerned. Zarvok stared at her, unsure of how to answer. "We're doing what we can," Zarvok managed, his voice shaky. "But this cold, it's more than we can handle for much longer. I don't understand how you and your team are still so comfortable." Jensen shrugged lightly. "We've been through worse, trust me. When you grow up on a death world like Earth, you learn how to deal with a little cold." Zarvok blinked. "A little cold?" The Grelk leader glanced at the frost creeping along the walls and windows. The temperature outside was well below the point where most species would even function, yet here the humans were calling it a little cold. Jensen chuckled softly. "Yeah, I guess it's all relative. You know, back on Earth, we've got places where the temperature drops even lower than this. And we live there. It's just part of our day-to-day." She took a sip from her thermos, her breath turning to mist in the frigid air. "Cold's not so bad if you know how to handle it." Zarvok's mind raced, trying to imagine living in a place where temperatures like this were common. For the Grelk, it was unimaginable. The warmth of their home planet, the reliance on technology to moderate their environment, none of that had prepared them for a situation like this. Meanwhile, Liam was showing a few Grelk how to layer properly for insulation, helping them wrap themselves more efficiently in blankets. His easygoing attitude never wavered. "The trick is trapping the heat close to your body," he explained. "You don't want to lose it to the air. And keep moving, get the blood flowing." One of the Grelk, nearly too weak to stand, looked up at him with a mix of desperation and confusion. Moving? In this? We're barely able to stand. Liam gave him an encouraging smile. Trust me, you've got to move, or the cold's going to get to you even faster. Just a little bit, small movements, enough to keep your circulation going. Here, watch. He demonstrated a series of quick exercises, simple movements designed to generate heat without too much effort. Hesitantly, the Grelk tried to follow his lead. Though it looked clumsy at first, the effect was immediate. Their bodies began to feel just a bit warmer. The Grelk leader watched in awe as his people mimicked the humans' movements, and for the first time since the heater failure, Zarvok noticed the color returning to their faces. It was a simple solution, something the Grelk had never considered because they relied so heavily on external technology for their survival. The humans, on the other hand, relied on themselves. That adaptability, that confidence in their ability to survive under any conditions, was something the Grelk had never seen before. Zarvok shifted slightly, realizing how still he had been. He could barely feel his feet, and his hands were like ice. Despite his body's protests, he started to mimic the movements Liam had shown. After a few minutes, he could feel his blood moving again, warming him from the inside out. The humans were proving something with every action. They didn't just endure hardship, they embraced it, adapted to it, and in some cases, seemed to thrive in it. Jensen's team continued to help the Grelk, setting up small, portable heat sources and offering hot drinks. They made it look easy, even when the situation was anything but. Zarvok found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about the Deathworlders. They weren't just tough, they were practically indestructible in ways that the Grelk couldn't even begin to understand. Where the Grelk saw a crisis, the humans saw a challenge, and one they fully expected to overcome. Zevnak, who had been working feverishly on the heating system for hours, finally slumped down next to Zarvok, his face drawn and pale. "I've done everything I can," he muttered. "It's going to be hours before the system is back online, if it even works." Zarvok's heart sank, but before he could say anything, Jensen spoke up. "We'll manage. We've got enough supplies to keep us warm until then. And we'll help you make it through, too." The calm assurance in her voice left no room for doubt. The humans were in control of the situation, even if the Grelk had lost theirs. As the hours dragged on, Jensen's team continued to lead the way, showing the Grelk how to conserve their energy, how to eat and drink to maintain their core temperature, and how to focus on surviving rather than panicking. Zarvok couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration for these strange beings. They didn't need complex systems or advanced technology to survive. They simply needed each other and their collective willpower. It was humbling for the Grelk leader, who had always thought of his species as superior in their reliance on science and engineering. But now, faced with this unforgiving cold, he realized the true strength of the humans lay in something far more primal. Jensen caught Zarvok's eye and gave him a reassuring nod. "We'll get through this. Together." For the first time since the heating system had failed, Zarvok believed her. The humans, with their unshakable resolve and practical solutions, had turned a disaster into something they could handle. To them, this was just another day on a death world. And as Zarvok felt the warmth slowly return to his fingers and toes, he couldn't help but marvel at the resilience of the species standing beside him. Humans weren't just survivors. They were conquerors of any environment, any situation, no matter how dire. Zevnak finally let out a sigh of relief as the heating system sputtered back to life. The once crippling cold in the outpost began to ease, and the temperature slowly started to climb. The Grelk engineers exchanged exhausted but triumphant glances, their bodies still stiff from the hours of exposure to the freezing temperatures. They had been on the edge of despair, fully aware of how close they had come to being overwhelmed by the cold. But while the Grelk were regaining their sense of security, the humans barely acknowledged the change in temperature. For them, the return of the heat wasn't some dramatic shift, just another part of the situation they had already mastered. Jensen's team remained calm, organized, and composed, as though they had never been concerned in the first place. The Grelk couldn't understand it. Zarvok, now feeling his body warm up, turned to Captain Jensen. "You and your team How are you so unfazed by this? We thought we were done for. Yet you, he paused, searching for the right words. You acted like it was nothing. Just a minor problem. Jensen smiled, taking off her now unnecessary thermal gear. Because, in a way, it was. You see, we're used to dealing with situations where things go wrong. The cold? Well, it's just another thing you adapt to. You don't panic. You don't lose your head, and most importantly, you don't let fear take over. Once you get that, the rest is just following the steps to stay alive. Zarvok was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. It was true. Fear had nearly undone them all. The Grelk, so accustomed to relying on technology to solve every problem, had panicked the moment that crutch was taken away. The humans, on the other hand, had relied on their instincts, their knowledge, and each other. They had treated the freezing cold like an inconvenience, while the Grelk had seen it as the end. Jensen's team began packing up their portable heaters and emergency shelters, casually chatting about their next steps. The crisis was over, and they moved on like it had been nothing more than a passing storm. Zarvok watched them with a growing sense of admiration and, to his surprise, gratitude. You've taught us something today, Zarvok said, his voice thoughtful. We always thought our technology would be enough to protect us, to keep us safe in any environment. But without it, we would have perished. You humans, you've shown us a different kind of strength. Jensen chuckled softly. We just did what anyone would do in our position. Zarvok shook his head.
No.
Most species would have panicked, frozen literally and figuratively.
But not you.
You knew how to survive, because you've been surviving your whole existence. That's the difference. Jensen looked at him, a glint of understanding in her eyes. Maybe. Or maybe it's just that we've gotten used to not relying on perfect conditions. We don't expect things to go right, so when they don't, we're ready for it. Zevnak, now standing and stretching his sore muscles, nodded in agreement. It's humbling. We've always prided ourselves on our advancements, on our ability to control the environments we enter. But we never learned how to manage when that control is taken away. Liam, who had been stowing away gear, chimed in with his usual grin. Hey, we didn't even break out the snowshoes this time. It wasn't so bad. The Grelk couldn't help but smile at that. Despite everything, the humans kept the mood light, their sense of humor never fading. Even after hours of fighting against freezing temperatures, they managed to find the humor in the situation. As the diplomatic talks resumed, the atmosphere was different. The Grelk were more relaxed now, more receptive. They had seen the humans in a new light, and with that came a deeper respect, a recognition that these Deathworlders were not just resilient. They were adaptable in ways that the Grelk had never imagined. Zarvok leaned in slightly as the conversation turned back to matters of trade and cooperation. I've been thinking, Captain Jensen, if your people are so comfortable in environments like this, perhaps we could arrange for some joint missions in other extreme climates. There's much we could learn from your survival techniques. Jensen raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by the idea. You want to throw your people into more harsh conditions just to learn from us? Zarvok shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. We need to be prepared for anything. Clearly, there's much we don't know about real survival. And I suspect your people could teach us a great deal. Jensen glanced around at her team, who seemed equally amused by the thought. Well, if you're willing to deal with the cold, we'd be happy to show you a few things. But trust me, you don't want to try Earth's worst winters anytime soon. Zarvok nodded in acknowledgement, but there was a gleam in his eye that suggested the idea wasn't entirely out of the question. He had seen what humans could endure, and part of him was curious to see just how far their resilience could stretch. The conversation continued, lighter now, with an undertone of mutual respect that hadn't been there before. The Grelk, who had once viewed humans as simply another species to negotiate with, now saw them as something more, an ally with skills and knowledge that could one day prove invaluable. As the talks wound down and both sides prepared to depart, Jensen and Zarvok exchanged a final glance. There was no need for further words. The experience had spoken for itself. Before they left, Liam turned back to the Grelk delegation with a grin. Next time, maybe we'll host you on Earth. Wintertime. Bring your warmest gear. The Grelk shared a nervous laugh, but the thought lingered in their minds. Earth's winter? If what they had experienced on this frozen moon was merely a mild inconvenience for humans, what kind of nightmare was Earth's coldest season? Jensen shook her head, amused by the thought. Maybe start with something a bit easier than Earth. Baby steps. As the humans prepared to depart, the Grelk watched them with newfound respect. Deathworlders, they had learned, were more than just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, adaptable to any challenge, ready to face whatever came their way with calm confidence and a sense of humor. And as Zarvok stood at the outpost's entrance, watching the humans walk out into the cold without a hint of hesitation, he realized that he, too, wanted to learn what it meant to face adversity with that kind of fearlessness. Humans had shown them that surviving wasn't just about technology or preparation, it was about attitude. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all.